A warm welcome also from me here in the Ecclesia Church in Göttingen. If you don't know me, my name is Marc. It's a great privilege and joy that I am allowed to speak to you today in the first of the two church services that we're having. We have a little script, outline of the message on your chair today. And we just want to make it possible that you can take notes, or you can have something to remember the message that you can take home with you and think about this during the week. You know, it's February already. Isn't that something? The year is just going by so fast. We just got started. And the big event in February is Valentine's Day. Now, people celebrate it in different ways, of course. Some people don't do anything about it, but it's a big one for me in our house. And it's a day of remembering people that love each other, couples that love each other, and them doing something nice for each other. And so we're just taking that as a reason to spend the month of February talking about relationships, so we can have better relationships. And you know, it's important, guys. You know, mark that date on your calendar and make sure you do something nice for your sweetheart. And you know, think of something that you can do for them, or give them as a little present or something, to not just on that day, but I like to do that, you know, at different times, and just do something to brighten up the day and let them know that I love her. So, yeah. And so we like to talk about relationships then in February. And you know, the Bible has a lot to say about relationships. And we just talked about fellowship in having communion with one another. I mean, just, you know, having deep relationships with one another as people of God. And we were talking about that with the creed, and also in December. And we noticed when we were talking about Jesus that he had a perfect relationship with God the Father. A very, very intimate, deep relationship. And it's not by chance that God put this need and this yearning for this kind of a relationship in our makeup, so that we could have a relationship with him, but also be able to have a deep relationship with someone else. And you know, when we have a partner, a couple, when you're a couple, you have an exclusive, deep relationship with that other person. And you have a covenant of marriage. Two people get married. They do it in front of a court of justice, you know, justice of the peace, or some sort of a legal method, so that it's clear to all the people around them. It's a social covenant too. And you know, it's so much fun to be a young couple, and oh, you're just in love, and oh, you got these butterflies, and everything's so new and exciting. You know, when I was just getting to know my wife, and at the time I was a youth pastor here in this church, and so I was actually studied in seminary near Frankfurt in the center of Germany, but I drove 250 kilometers or whatever to get up here. Say maybe, I don't know how far it is, say 150 miles, I don't know, from Frankfurt. It's about 2.5 hour drive. So I, you know, drive that here on a Friday night and teach the youth here. And then that wasn't enough. Then I got in the car and I drove all the way over to Bochum, which is on the Ruhr River toward the Rhine. And that's another 2.5, 3 hours of driving to get there, and just so I could have a day to to spend time with Kati that I was getting to know ever better and falling in love with. And then after that, then I drove another 3 hours or whatever to get back to Frankfurt. So, yeah, those are exciting times. And I know how I felt the first time I held her hand, and everything was just like electricity in me. It's just so exciting. But after a while, a relationship has some problems that come up. And so I would like to title this series Between a Heartthrob in Daily Life. And this is so important. The things that are going on, in relationships and building healthy relationships. So I'd like to show you just a few pictures, typical pictures of relationships, and yeah, it's the romantic idea of how things are supposed to look like, having uh, a perfect Christmas picture to send, and you're the perfect family. Your kids are so well adjusted and behaving all the time, and just a perfect world, nothing special. And we don't have any problems. We're just going through life and everything's fine. Everything's so wonderful. And we just go from one good thing to another good thing and no problems. And that's the picture that we have going, yeah, for the outside, that we like to show the outside world. But sometimes it gets to the point that couples have problems that they can't work through, and maybe they aren't even really talking to each other. Maybe they just go through the actions of, yeah, just being together. Maybe they get to screaming at each other, even throwing something through the room in their anger and frustration. And you look maybe on social media accounts and you see everybody that's having this perfect life. And maybe the guys flee to certain things, but ladies, you have these romance novels and romantic comedies that you like to watch and stuff. Probably not the guys so much, but yeah, that's your thing. And you have this idea of what the perfect guy, the perfect marriage, whatever is supposed to look like, right? And and the guys have certain things that they're probably thinking about too. And so, I mean, if you if you got this ideal in your head, you're not going to win because this is an ideal. And you look at these kids, and maybe the kids are acting out, and maybe they're having a bad phase in life or whatever, and you think, oh, everything's going haywire. And if social media is kind of driving you astray and making you think that you're awful, and you're comparing yourself, or you're spending too much time there or whatever, if it's not a healthy thing for you, just quit it. Just get rid of your account for half a year and take a break from it, and do things that are wholesome for your life and uplifting. But every couple, every person goes through times when they have frustration and disappointment. Nobody's perfect. And there's no relationship that you can have that is perfect. I think we really know that. But we have a tendency to fall into this trap, fall into this lie that it's not right. And you know, even a pastor can fight really good with his wife. Believe me. I mean, it's true. And you know, the worst time to have a fight is Sunday morning. And that happens. And then here you are Sunday morning, you think, I've got to preach a sermon. I'm going to stand up there and preach, you know, if I just, you know, tore my wife apart. Lord have mercy. But you know, I've got the best and the most beautiful wife on the whole planet. I am so thankful for her. But you know, all of these irritations, all of these, yeah, all of these arguments and stuff that we have, it's just a part of human nature, and we're all in the same boat. It's like nobody has it any better, right? Everybody's got it. But you know, a lot of it stems from the fact that we have a false idea, a false standard of how things are supposed to be, or maybe you don't know anybody that has a different kind of relationship. And maybe you're a perfectionist in other things, and you think, oh, well, if I'm going to have love, well, this has to be a perfect relationship. This has to be a perfect love. And then maybe you think, oh, well, this isn't happening with this person anymore. What happened? I mean, you know, we used to, you know, be really nice to each other and really sweet and everything. And oh, that's not, she's not doing that anymore, or he's not, you know. And then you decide, oh, well, then it's not a true love. And so then you end the relationship. And then you go and get a different one. And maybe it's okay in the beginning. Yeah. But you just, that can get into a repetitious circle. And this is a falsehood, that love is only a true love, of true love, but it's only then when it's not perfect, because there isn't such a thing as being perfect. And so true love is a true love when it's asks for forgiveness. And you know, a person that's truly loving also is there. They're committed to you, even if everything within them says, I want to run out of this, I want to get out of this, you know, I want to run away, I can't stand this, but they still stay. And you know, instead of, I once heard this story about like two donkeys, you know, and they can either kick at each other with their back legs, or they can put their heads together and kick against the world. And it's kind of like this thing, a true love, or a person that's committed and loving with you is going to work toward unity. And so we'd like to look at the story of Hannah and her husband, her family, and this is about 1,200 years before Jesus was born. It's a long time ago, but they were in the land of Israel, and that land was governed by priests. And it was kind of a dark period where there were 12 tribes that were in Israel, and the priests that were there were the Levites. Those were the special people set apart to God. And so Hannah's husband, Elkanah, wanted to go with his whole family. He had two wives, Hannah, and the other one, Peninnah. and Peninnah had children, but Hannah didn't. And anyway, so Elkanah, he was a righteous man. He loved the Lord, and he did whatever he had to. He wanted to go up to Shiloh to worship the Lord once a year, and that was important to him. And he left his home, he left his animals or whatever, and he just took what he needed to worship the Lord and his family, and he went to Shiloh once a year. And even people that are serving God have real marriage problems. I mean, it happens. It's not impartial. It's not partial who it picks on. It's marriage problems happen all over. So the first thing you see that also families that are dedicated to God, that love God, they still have pain and problems and different pressures. So let's look at this story about Hannah in 1 Samuel chapter 1, starting at verses 4 and 5. It says, on the day with Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, his second wife, and all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her more. Now you can see, anybody who's been around women a while can see that this is going to make trouble. The first thing I'd like to say, though, is that it wasn't unusual in those days that a man would have more than one wife. So even though we think that's going to be a recipe for problems, it wasn't necessarily, because it was kind of a cultural norm. So anyway, sometimes it's a challenge to just be married, period, and to be married to two women and have then their children or lack thereof. That's a lot of relationships to navigate. So here we see that there is pain and there are problems in this relationship, but the main thing here is, how do you deal with them? Because everybody's going to have them. Where do you go? And for Hannah, the situation she was in was especially painful. Because back then, the wife, her worth, her honor was measured by how many children she had, especially sons. And if you didn't have any, you'd be laughed at. They wouldn't take you seriously. You didn't have anything to say. I mean, you were kind of worthless. And so this was a great point of pain in her life. The Bible doesn't leave these nasty details out. It tells it just like it is. Now, if this would be on social media today, people would leave that out, right? But anyway, let's go on with the story. And her rival, the second wife, used to provoke her grievously to irritate her because the Lord had closed her womb. So they were picketing on her. I mean, she was being mobbed or whatever by this other wife with all the children. So it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore, Hannah wept and would not eat. So what was supposed to be a very joyful time of worshiping God and being in his presence became an even more painful experience for her. And that's a terrible marriage crisis. I mean, it's a situation that doesn't seem to to have any solution. There can be illnesses, there can be job situations or whatever, things that seem like there's no way out. It's hopeless. And maybe you come to church, but then you go back home and you see the situation, and it's, you just get this heaviness. But you know, we still have to go to God, and we still have to be honest with ourselves. And that's the way life looks like. But I'd like to say that true love, when there's really love in the situation, is not easy, but it's worth the effort. But you know, despite the situation she was in, she had a good husband. That was worth a lot. And he was a nice guy, and he loved her, right? It says he loved her. Why are you laughing? Anyway, it says, and Elkanah, her husband, said to her, "Hey, Hannah, why do you weep?" He didn't get it. "And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not worth more to you than 10 sons?" He was real humble, wasn't he? Hey, you know, we left home. We made all these preparations. We're in the holy place where the Lord wants us to meet Him. And aren't I worth more to you than anything that's going on? And you know, I've got to say, hey, man, come on. So, well, you know, we have a wife that is heartbroken and full of problems, crying her eyes out, and not eating, and we're just giving them the fast answer because we analyze and we give a solution. I mean, that's who we are. But the second thing I'd like to say is sometimes your partner doesn't need a solution. Sometimes your partner just needs somebody to listen, and your presence. And that's so true. Women sometimes talk to try to figure things out, and they have to look at it from all angles and stuff. And the poor guy, you know, he, oh, get me out of here, you know. But anyway, that's just differences in people that get married. But Hannah's husband wasn't very sensitive to what she really needed, and he wasn't very helpful. It wasn't that he meant poorly, he was trying to help. But anyway, we'll continue here. She was deeply distressed, and she prayed to God. She prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. So she realized, you know, help wasn't going to come from her husband, and she was getting battered by this other woman. And she vowed a vow to God, and she said, "O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget, then I will give you and give me a son, then I will give you to him." And in her deep despair and her crying out of the bitterness of soul, she had a prayer. It wasn't a real theologically correct formal prayer that she prayed. She was screaming in her heart to God. And you know, sometimes the strongest prayers, the most effective prayers, are the one where you really just are so honest. And have you told God with your own honest words without holding anything back, just being real authentic and real with him and saying, God, this is where it's at for me. This is what hurts. This is what I'm dealing with, and just screaming at him, telling him, help me, help me. He knows the cry of your heart. And Hannah told him just the way it is. And so the next thing I want to notice here is that God-fearing couples don't avoid the pain, but they invite God into the situation. And I think there's a danger if we just try to deal with it ourselves and don't put God in the equation here. Because we'll have a tendency to say, oh, you're the problem. Nein, you're the problem, and point fingers, or, you know. But if we both look to God and pray, then God has a chance to take care of the situation, to change us, or whatever needs to be done. He's the Almighty, the wise Creator that made us. He knows what's going on, and He knows what the solution is. And you know, the most intimate thing you can do as a couple is to pray together. It may not sound like it, you know, on the surface, but it is. It's bearing your soul, but also being honest before God. You know, even for Christian couples, it's a hard thing for them to pray together. There's somebody that really doesn't want that kind of power to be set free. But that doesn't mean that everything's always wonderful just because you prayed. But it means that God is going to hear your prayers. It says that if 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'm going to be there. And you've already got 2. So Jesus is there. He's making the 3. And if you love me and keep my commandments, ask whatever you will, and it will be done for you. I mean, what more do you need? God is there. You're 2 of you. You're keeping his commandments. You're talking to him. He's going to take care of it. He's not going to leave you falling. And when you pray, you're showing every outside force that's trying to destroy you that this marriage belongs to God. You know, going back to the story with Hannah, there was a priest called Eliah, and he was sitting kind of at the entrance to the temple, and he saw these people that were coming in, and I picture it kind of like he was maybe like in a rocking chair or whatever, you know. Okay, well, yeah, this one's coming in, and yeah, in 5 minutes they leave, and then have a good day, and you know. But he noticed that Hannah was a long time in the temple, that she was praying a long time, and he went and saw that she was moving her mouth and saying something, but since she was there such a long time, he thought, well, she was drunk or something. And then she said, no, I'm not. I'm praying to God. And Elia didn't even know what she was praying. But he said, may God give that to you that you're praying for. And she made a vow that if she would get a son, that no razor would touch his hair, that she'd give him totally to God. This was a sign of dedicating. And he said, yeah, may God answer your prayer. He didn't even know what the prayer was. The fourth thing I'd like to say is that prayer might or might not change your circumstances, but it definitely is going to change you. You know, nothing on the surface had changed when she left that prayer time. On the surface, she wasn't pregnant yet, right? But she was changed. She had hope. Maybe the second wife was still provoking and still telling her all these terrible things, but she had hope. And it was a different situation within her. And so whatever your problem is, God first wants to work in your heart. And it's often the place where he works the most, where you're desperate, where you're hungry for him, where you're just not knowing which way to turn. So let's go further. The next day is they rose early in the morning and worshiped before the Lord, all of them, right? And then they went back to their house at Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife, that means she got pregnant, and God remembered her. And in due time, Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Samuel, for she said, I have asked for him from the Lord. That's what Samuel means. And every year, Hannah had gone to the temple and she had been crying her eyes out. She refused to eat. It was just probably the worst time of the whole year for her. But this year, when she came back from the temple, everything was different. And you know, that's something her husband said, hey, before we start our trip home, let's go back and worship the Lord one more time before we leave. And it says in due time, she had a son. So I don't know if it was 9 months later or if it took a little longer. We don't know. But I think that God is speaking to someone through this message. Maybe you're a widowed, maybe you're single, maybe you're married, maybe you're happily married, maybe you're having problems and you're married. But you know, the husband wanted to go back and worship the Lord again. And for God, it's not unimportant that we maintain a relationship with him. Things happen in our daily life. Things get in the way. Things go wrong, we think. But God wants us to turn to him. And he has promised that those that he has called and are following him, he's called according to his purpose. He has a purpose for each one of us because he made us, and he has a reason why he made us. But if we search for him, if we want to follow him, he's going to let us get into that purpose. And we'll find that purpose. We'll be fulfilled in our purpose why we're here. And we need to come to him. That's the only place we can go. I think that there's a key here. I think that God says, open your heart to me first and foremost. And because if you're not open to me, if you don't have a relationship with me, you're going to run into all these blockades. And he won't immediately change things necessarily, but he'll start changing your heart. And circumstances will change. When love can't take away the pain, like this husband, he wasn't able to take away the pain, God is the one that we can go to. And we can lay everything down at his feet. We can tell him about everything. So at the end of this message, I'd just like to invite you to think about these things. Please close your eyes so you can think about it better. We all have so many different experiences we've had. And I don't know if this message is hit the nail on the head with what your relationship is, what you're going through. But you know, there are people in your life that want to love you, that they do love you, try to help you, support you, but you still have pain. There's a place, it's a painful place in your life. And God's saying, come to me. I want to give you a chance right now to just go into this holy place, this secret place with God, and talk to him. So I've got two questions today. The first one, do you want to put your trust in this God, in Jesus Christ? A God that worked this miracle in the life of Hannah. If you're here and you feel within yourself, yeah, I feel how God is drawing me close to him, and I want to believe in him. I want to believe in Jesus and follow him. And I know it might not be easy, but raise your hand as a sign of this faith that you want to say to God, here I am, God, take me. And the second question I have is, do you need new hope for your relationship? Maybe you've given up. Maybe there's something that's been just going on for so long and you've given up. Maybe you've tried in your own strength, in your own wisdom or whatever, to try to get things back on track, whatever it is. Then decide, make a definite decision to put a new foundation in this relationship, in that you're going to trust God. And maybe it's a situation with your children, whatever it is. This prayer is for you. You know how we are, Lord. You made us. You know how we tick. You know what our problems are. But let your love come into our life. and bring it into marriages, relationships where their hope has been lost, and bring their new life into these relationships where things just seem to be going according to routine or whatever, but there's no joy, there's no life, there's no creativity. And I pray, Lord, that you become the firm foundation, the firm foundation in these relationships. The Bible says that two people can help each other, because if one falls down, then the other one will help them up. But then it says a three-braided cord is not easily broken. And the third one in this two, the third one is God. In that relationship is not easily broken. I thank you, Lord. I thank you and love you so much. Amen. So between a throbbing heart and the daily troubles, God loves you. Amen.